This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sub-Saharan Africa is the epicenter of mobile money, which allows users to store, send, and receive money using nothing more than their mobile phones. Mobile money users don't need a bank account or the internet. As the sector continues to grow, criminal activity is also on the rise. Scammers and fraudsters are coming up with increasingly more sophisticated ways to con, cheat, and steal the money in people's phones. This week on Talk Africa, we look at the evolving risks associated with mobile money, how individuals can protect themselves, and what mobile operators and government agencies are doing to help. I am Liu Feifei. Welcome to Talk Africa. The use of mobile money has developed into a multi-billion-dollar industry in Africa. Let's take a look at some of the developments and challenges in the industry over the last 10 years.
Mobile money is now an everyday feature of life in East Africa. The beauty of it is, all that's needed is a mobile phone and SIM card, which enables access to the widest possible users in the region. Mobile technologies and services generated over $100 billion of economic value in Sub-Saharan Africa in 2017, representing 7.7% of the GDP and supporting approximately 3.5 million jobs in the region. It is now used to pay for everything from groceries to business transactions. With its evolving and innovative services, mobile money providers now even offer savings and loans facilities. The use of mobile money is not without challenges though. The most concerning is about the security of services it provides. In Kenya, a study shows that more than 70% of Kenyans have been victims of financial fraud or know someone who has. Further, data reveals one is more likely to be conned through a mobile money transaction compared to ATM cards, online banking, or use of checks. With the evolving services mobile money provides, concerted measures will need to be taken from all stakeholders to ensure the maximized benefits to users.
Joining me to further discuss some of the risks and solutions for the mobile money market are Rob Chapman, Chairman of the Risk and Assurance Group, and Joseph Nderitu, Telecom's Revenue Assurance and Fraud Management Consultant. Welcome, gentlemen, to Talk Africa. How would you describe the impact of mobile money across Sub-Saharan Africa?
So if we think about it, just to look at the context, first mobile money solution went live in Kenya in 2007, 0 customers at the time. Talking about roughly 10 years later, we had 11 million customers on that platform, a lot of services deployed, a lot of payments going through that amount. Looking at the latest statistic for March 2018, we see about 3.7 trillion shillings going through the mobile money platform. So the impact of mobile money has been in a number of areas. One is really just opening up the unbanked population, getting a significant population on banking services without having to have a bank account or without having to have access even to a computer. So it means that even with just a simple handset, a person can actually participate in the mobile money ecosystem. The other thing that it has done is to provide better ways of purchasing services, better ways of paying for services, better ways of paying for utilities. And now we are also seeing better ways of accessing government services because citizens can actually pay for services using mobile money. And then the last one is actually in terms of providing employment to a number of people who work in the mobile money distribution chain in the form of agents, and that has a knock-on effect because they actually then consume services, they have to employ other people and the like.
Have you got anything to add to that, Rob?
It's been a phenomenal period of growth. I mean, the acceleration that's gone on in recent years especially has been absolutely incredible. We're looking at over $1 billion US transacted daily through the processes, and the acceleration of 25% growth of accounts just over the last year alone. It's a remarkable transition in terms of the economic support that it's now given across the entire continent. So I just think it's an incredibly exciting thing to be witnessing. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, as Joseph was saying, for the unbanked to actually be able to even save money.
And I do want to come back to the numbers, gentlemen, but one of the things that he mentioned was that mobile money has helped people access financial services, the previously unbanked. But it's also the people who have no access to the internet, right?
Yes, so we're seeing a lot of mobile money customers because of having been introduced to this new technology, they become curious about what else is out there. So they become curious about smartphones, they become curious about digital payment services, and therefore their rate of adoption of technological change has been spurred by mobile money services. And this is right across, not just from Kenya where it originated, but we are seeing the same thing happening in Tanzania. In Tanzania, just last month, Vodacom celebrated 10 years of M-Pesa. And again, we're seeing phenomenal growth from 0 to 11 million customers in less than a decade.
And how would you, after 10 years of explosive growth in this sector, how would you quantify the size and the value of this industry today?
So one is to look at the values that are going through the platforms. We are seeing, for example, in Kenya, as at the end of March 2018, there were reports published by the central bank saying that up to 3.7 trillion Kenya shillings were moving through the platform. That's quite a huge amount of money. And that impacts a lot of business entities, impacts a lot of customers. The actual number of customers active on those mobile platforms is approaching 30 million, just sometimes even just on one operator. So that gives a scale of the number of people who are active on that platform and the amounts of money that they are moving. And the other thing that has happened is that it's become also a revenue channel for mobile operators, especially as voice and SMS revenues are in decline.
Rob, can you tell us about what is the size, the amount of money that is being lost every day?
We really, as far as I'm aware, we really don't know what the possible size of the fraud is in total. What we do know is that the operators are working very hard to make sure that the systems put in place are secure, that the processes are firmed, and that customer education is paramount.
But would you say it's a security risk that is quite severe? It's happening all the time.
It is happening all the time in smaller doses, I think. It is a security risk, but to be honest, I don't perceive the risks existing within the systems that the operators are providing. I know that, as Joseph said, the media has been awash with reports of fraud happening, but I think there is a little bit of sensationalism there, which is very sadly, I think, undermining the reputation of mobile money across Africa.
Or in fact, it might be a bit hard at this stage to quantify the risk. But let's say this, Joseph, and you're a fraud management expert. If I have 5,000 Kenyan shillings in my mobile phone, mobile money account, what are the different ways in which it could be stolen from me?
Well, that's a question that's keeping a lot of us awake. And there are countless ways that you could actually lose that money. I'll just give a few examples. One of them is having your mobile SIM card swapped. And that could be done by fraudsters who work in collaboration with employees who work with operators because they have access to the system. And once they swap your line, they have access to your mobile wallet and they can get out the money, withdraw it at any of the multitude of agent points that we have.
This SIM swapping exercise, how exactly does it happen? How does someone swap my SIM? It's in my phone.
We have, as operators, we have seen operators falling victim to the same innovation that we provided to the customers. So the SIM swap in itself is a service that should be used, for example, because somebody has misplaced their SIM card, or their SIM card is faulty, or for another valid reason. So SIM swaps have been provided to ensure that you get a replacement of that line. Now, what happens, however, is that using credentials of that line, it is possible for internal users of mobile operators to actually replace your line without your knowledge, have access to your mobile wallet, and then get the money out.
Now, what are some of the other innovative ways in which these thieves and scam artists are stealing our mobile money?
So account takeover is a huge problem. One of the real problems, which really will depend on the customer education, is social engineering fraud. There's an awful lot of social engineering fraud where the end users are effectively conned out of their personal data, their personal information and security information, which is then used to access their account to strip it clean.
And so what is your advice for us, for the mobile money users, which I am one of? How can we protect ourselves?
It really is about maintaining your personal security information. Do not share it. The PIN, for example, is a personal identification number. It should always remain with you. The companies will never ask you for it. A representative of an organization should never ask you to disclose that because it is unique to you.
And you spoke just now about training the end users and providing education. How would I go about getting some of this education?
First I fully agree with Rob that the PIN is obviously, once that is compromised, it's game over. But in terms of education, there's a lot that operators are trying to put in place. We've seen SMS broadcasts going to the whole subscriber base. We've seen YouTube advertisements being targeted at users. We've seen road shows where operators actually try and talk to customers and enlighten them. But ultimately, it's about making sure that customers have a way, even though their PIN may be compromised, that there is a way to quickly react to that before the money is out.
Oh, that's a good point. So assume my money has been stolen from me. It's been defrauded out of my mobile money account. What should I do?
You should contact your operator immediately, you know that's the case, to make sure that they understand that your account has been compromised. So at least then they can put in measures and restrictions to prevent any further damage or loss.
What are the chances of me getting that money back?
Well, they are slim, that's for sure. But what's happening is I've seen operators actually put in place ways of communicating that your line has actually been swapped or your account has been compromised in a faster way. So you probably don't even have to call and be put on queue to talk to a call center agent. There are operators who are providing USSD shortcodes where you can quickly just dial and provide that information and your line is deactivated in the meantime. So to answer that question, there is really no silver bullet to this problem. We are all struggling to just find solutions, and it means that whereas we can put system controls, we also need customers to first not disclose their PINs, but also when something happens to quickly use the channels available to report it.
But in the case of the SIM swapping, that's really nothing much the end user, the customer, can do about that, right?
No. I mean, once it has been compromised, and especially if there's collusion from within inside the organization, then as Joseph said, it can be game over.
And these are some of the more simple ways that people have been defrauded, but there are larger, more complex security issues. For example, there are system issues, right? Systematic issues related to system malfunctions or hacking at the system-wide level. What can individual end users do to protect themselves against that?
Very, very little, in my opinion. This is down to the operators and the service providers to shore up and make sure. They should be ensuring that their security is valid enough and current enough. They should be monitoring and making sure that any infringement is dealt with very, very quickly.
Yes, indeed.
So if I could just add to that. So the user correctly can never do anything about the back-end systems that are used in processing mobile money transactions. However, there are also some of these innovations that we have put in place as operators that users are using. For example, apps. Where you can use a mobile money app on your phone. And we must be cognizant of the fact that these apps have certain vulnerabilities. And therefore, for example, how we save our passwords on phones for accessing those mobile money apps, that already provides a risk that could actually be exploited by hackers. So cybercrime is probably coming. There's not much that customers can do about, but operators need their help to ensure that as apps are being developed and as customers are using those apps, they take due care in keeping safe the credentials that they use to access those mobile money apps.
And in fact, I want to have a follow-up on that because it's actually happened to me as I was paying with my mobile money, the entire system, and I won't name who this provider was, the system crashed. So I was actually stuck in a cab and I was trying to tell the driver, look, I've already transferred the money. And he said, no, I haven't received it in my account. But I guess my question is, when the system failures occur, what should the customer do at that moment?
It's unfortunate, and we do know that there are customers who are inconvenienced in such cases, and that's why we are also seeing operators providing different channels of accessing your mobile money account. So you may be able to access it on the app, you may be able to access it on the USSD string, or you may be able to access it using an internet web page. So it's probably just familiarizing ourselves as customers with the different channels. But as you say, if it has happened as a failure in the back end, then at that point, really the customer has just got a raw deal.
Rob, have you anything to add to that?
Really just that there will always be fraud. It will always persist. And the fraudsters are very clever and they can be very agile and much faster to act than large operator companies who will then have to put in strong measures to combat that. So the fraudster's agility is really the problem. It's something that will be combated. This is still in its infancy in reality, so everybody is still learning. The customers are still learning, the operators are learning, and even governments and regulators are still learning what's happening. So there must be a continual feedback loop so that that can develop in the right way.
And we want to know more about those learnings when we come back. We will be joined again by our panel of experts, and we'll talk about some of the possible solutions to the challenges of mobile money security. Thank you, and stay tuned.
China Global Television Network. From broadcast centers in Beijing, Washington, and Nairobi. A unique global perspective. 6 channels and a video content service. News when you want it and where you want it. On TV screens, websites, mobile platforms, and social media. CGTN. See the difference.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. My expert panel of guests are still here with me. We're joined by Rob Chapman, Chairman of the Risk and Assurance Group, and Joseph Nderitu, who is the Telecom Revenue Assurance and Fraud Management Consultant. Gentlemen, before the break, we were talking about all the different ways in which an individual user of mobile money can protect themselves. And we said that maybe when there are systematic-wide issues, it's hard for them to do much. Now, Rob, you just organized the Risk Assurance Group conference. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what were the outcomes and learnings out of that?
Thank you, yes. The Risk and Assurance Group, we hold these conferences globally. Across all the different markets we can. This is our second time on the African continent, being in Johannesburg last year. We come together, we try and do this to improve sharing and knowledge and collaboration across operators throughout the industry for the betterment of not just the operators themselves, but also for the customers, because ultimately they're the ones who will suffer if costs become too high, because that will have to be transferred on. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to come here and to talk specifically about mobile money, so that we can bring them together to share experiences, so that when one has thought of something another hasn't, then they both can benefit from that.
You were also there, Joseph. What were some of the learnings that you got from this conference?
I think the key thing that struck me at the conference is the challenges that we face are the same. The customers have a certain expectation from operators that we must safeguard their mobile money wallets. We must give them a good service. We must not provide them half a deal, so to speak, and that each operator has certain challenges, some of them system, some of them historical, but there are possible practical ways of doing that. And there was a lot of sharing of some of those things. Operators came with a lot of tips for each other. There was a lot of challenging each other. There was a lot of debate. And I think that's what the spirit of RAG Group is about.
So from all of these conversations that happened and all of the debate from the conference, what were some of the outcomes?
So some of the outcomes, I think my favorite outcome is that when we leave here, when we're done with the conference and we leave here, it doesn't stop. We've put everyone in touch and everyone is still collaborating, and so there are now other RAG unique chapters locally where the operators are still collaborating on a regular basis to discuss and share information. That for me is the real outcome.
Now, is there, across the sector, is there a framework for risk management and risk assurance that basically most of the providers adhere to?
back to Rob's earlier point, we are all learning in this one. We are seeing we don't really have a mobile money standard. We don't have a standard of risk management that is specific for mobile money. But there is a lot of copy-paste from existing risk management disciplines. IT systems have always had certain standards that were minimum baseline standards that must be included as part of deployment, as part of operation. And so there's a lot of copying those principles, so those concepts across to mobile money.
Like what, though? I'm just trying to understand it from a more practical level. Like, for me, as an end user, I want to ask the providers, what are you guys doing to protect my mobile money?
So, it's not just about the operators, because the operators will have very long lead times for development, and they obviously have a lot of cost to bear as well. So it's also about the vendors and the supplier of services that can provide solutions, security solutions.
By vendors and the supplier of services, are you talking about the mobile network providers then?
No, I'm actually talking about software development firms, for example, who will provide analytic solutions to help identify weaknesses or to identify attacks and patterns. And so it is about bringing everybody in the industry together to try and combat the issues we're seeing.
So for someone like you, say if you were working within a mobile service provider as a fraud assurance manager, what would be some of the things that you do daily to ensure mobile money safety?
I think the first one is really just looking at activities happening on subscriber accounts. So we have to configure our revenue assurance and fraud management systems to be able to detect anomalous behavior. So for example, your account balance should not change if there was no transaction that was carried out in the previous period. We should not be seeing your account going into negative. We should not be seeing your account being broken in terms of limits. We should not, if we have already built a pattern of your transactions, we should be able to see every time that pattern is broken. So there's a lot of development happening in terms of pattern recognition and understanding what is happening on customer accounts, and that is what was also a lot covered in the conference that we just had.
And what about the role of the government? What role do they play here? Why is it that mobile money has been more successful in some countries and not so in others?
I think it's because in business can move a lot faster than government and regulation, and so that's where the innovation stems from. And so that first push, that first step comes out, and the regulators are always going to be playing catch up. I mean, they have a lot of role and responsibility to the people of the country, but they also have a responsibility to the operators and the companies who are bringing in revenues into the country. I think that there should be better engagement from government entities within organizations and groups like RAG, so that then it's not just about these private companies sharing information and learning, it's also then got the government there to understand and see how these solutions persist, and to make sure that the operators and the providers aren't necessarily then taking the wrong approach to something that will end up in conflict later down the line.
And why is it that mobile money has succeeded in some countries and not so in others?
So the primary reason, speaking about Kenya, which was the birthplace of M-Pesa, was first there was obviously a need, and then back to the point that Rob has raised about regulator providing a level playing ground, not getting in the way of business, not getting in the way of innovation, but really just putting in place rules to safeguard the customers. That came together quite well in the case of Kenya. Now, unfortunately, that's not the same case. That's not the same thing we're seeing in a number of African countries, where the regulators have taken the view that they should just tax mobile money, keep on increasing excise tax on it, and use it as a cash cow of sorts. And that has all that has done is really to stifle the effect. So the need was there, but the regulatory environment that was created was actually helping. And I think if that is replicated in a lot of African markets, then we should see a lot more financial inclusion, and we should see a lot more improvement of the service, so that it provides a much better service and reduced risk to the customers.
And as it is today, I mean, mobile money has grown not just in size, but in the scale and types of services, right? It started with peer-to-peer money transactions, but now it's being used to do, well, airtime top-ups. It's being used to do bulk salary distributions, microloans, and whatnot. As these services become more and more sophisticated, will the risks associated with them also escalate?
Always. The risk will always escalate because you have more entry and exit points for these transactions to occur. And you'll have more people and more players in that market space. So yeah, the risk will increase, but again, the operators are working very hard to try and make sure that those risks are mitigated before they can manifest as genuine problems. It must be remembered that the providers of mobile money services, it's in their interest to safeguard the customers.
And I agree,
Yeah.
it is their interest. So what are the operators doing?
So the challenge is twofold. The technology will keep evolving. I think operators understand that with more advancement, with more interfaces to the mobile money platform, more risk comes. So the challenge is, how do we stay ahead of the curve? And staying ahead of the curve is investing in better monitoring systems, is investing in more initiatives to inform customers so that they can become our partners in assurance, so that they can become the first point that notifies us if something is happening. And it's about also engaging with the regulators to ensure that the regulations that are put in place and that are applied across the board cover not just mobile money providers, but also the providers of these other interfaces that connect to our core platforms. Because the security of the overall product is only as good as the security of all the interfacing systems.
Well, this has been a very insightful conversation. I have time for just one more question for each one of you gentlemen. There is a convergence between the services being offered by mobile money and online banking, right? And as the internet becomes more prevalent in all areas of the world, what do you think is going to be the future of mobile money? Are you going to be obsolete down the road?
No, I really don't think so. I'm sure that some of my colleagues and associates within the risk and assurance group would disagree, but I think mobile money is here to stay. I think that the increased availability of internet services for the possibility of online banking services, I think they're too late. I think that mobile money is here to stay as a transaction-based platform, and that the other financial services that banks will offer, such as savings and loans, they will likely continue. But I don't think it's going to damage mobile money.
And what are your thoughts on that, Joseph?
I fully agree with Rob on that one. And I think it's a coincidence that the question you've asked is also one of the final questions that was asked at the panel that we had at Risk and Assurance Group. And the debate was whether blockchain technologies and online banking will finally edge out mobile money. I don't think that will happen, and certainly not in the case of Africa, where mobile still has a long way to go. As a last mile solution, we're still going to have to use mobile for a number of years to come. There's still a lot of unbanked population in Africa. The potential is still there, and that is shown by the growth curve that we see on mobile money. So I think across all operators, there's still room for improvement. Maybe the question should be, how do we get online banking services and blockchain technologies to work in collaboration with mobile money?
Yeah,
Indeed.
absolutely. And on that note, it's not just Africa. We are seeing mobile money adoption across other places in the world. So we know that South Asia has picked it up. We also, I would be unsurprised to see it starting to exist in the States as well, in the US, given that I think a survey commissioned by the government in the US in 2016 suggested that up to 7% of US citizens did not have a bank account. So even in the US, in what is considered to be a technologically advanced, socially advanced country, they are really underbanked.
Thank you. And that's all we have time for this week. But a big thank you again to our guests for their insights. Mr. Rob Chapman, who is the chairman of the Risk and Assurance Group, and Joseph Nidaritu, Telecom Revenue Assurance and Fraud Management Consultant. Remember, we'd love to hear your feedback through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch the show on YouTube. Remember to join the conversation and keep it going, and tune in again next week for more of Talk Africa. From me, Liu Feifei, and the team here in Nairobi, it's goodbye.